they never told you this about sexual energy and prosperity. As Napoleon Hill once said, the emotion of sex has back of it the possibility of three constructive potentialities: the perpetuation of mankind, the maintenance of health, and the transformation of mediocrity into genius. In today's video, we're diving deep into Carl Jung's forgotten wisdom and uncovering a truth they never told you: that your sexual energy, when consciously directed, is the key to attracting not just wealth, but inner mastery, magnetic presence, and soul-aligned prosperity. What if the very energy you've been taught to suppress or waste was actually your gateway to building an empire? Drop a comment below. Have you ever felt like your energy could change the room or even your life? Let's talk about it. And if this resonates, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to remember their power. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom 1. The volcano within. Discipline versus depletion. Most men unknowingly drain their sexual energy every day, not realizing they're giving away the very force that could elevate them into their highest potential. This energy is sacred. It is not just biological, it is spiritual currency. The rare few who understand this don't chase pleasure, they channel power. They hold this fire within, not to suppress it, but to transmute it. Carl Jung called this process a form of alchemy, where raw, instinctual desire, the lead, is transformed into creative brilliance, spiritual magnetism, and inner gold. It's not celibacy that creates transformation, but conscious mastery. When this energy is retained and directed inward, it awakens something divine. It sharpens focus, deepens intuition, and magnetizes abundance, not just money, but influence, synchronicity, opportunity, and respect. Prosperity flows not from effort alone, but from frequency. And your frequency is powered by your energy reserves, not by what you give away too easily. In a society that encourages instant gratification, the ability to withhold, redirect, and elevate your energy becomes a spiritual awakening in itself. You begin to notice that your presence carries more weight. People listen differently. You speak less, but your words land deeper. You don't chase success, it circles back to you. This is the quiet power of the sovereign man. He walks with a fire in his chest and a calm in his eyes. He doesn't need to prove anything, because he's in command of the one thing that cannot be faked: his life force. The sexual energy that once ruled him is now the fuel behind his creative pursuits, his business decisions, his emotional depth, and his spiritual clarity. Jung saw this transformation not as repression, but as individuation, the becoming of the true self, where instincts are no longer enslaving, but serve a higher vision. The modern man often looks outside for validation, for shortcuts, for achievement, while the awakened man turns inward and asks, what am I leaking? What am I avoiding? What am I capable of creating if I stop squandering my essence? This question alone begins to reshape your path. Your energy is not just personal, it's magnetic. It broadcasts your beliefs, your boundaries, your intentions, and your inner structure. The man who guards his energy isn't closed off. He's aligned. He's not rigid. He's focused. He becomes a quiet storm in the room, not through intimidation, but through clarity. While others are drained by distraction, he builds. While others chase temporary highs, he anchors into legacy. While others erupt in moments of fleeting pleasure, he uses that volcano within to forge a new identity, one made not from reaction, but from intention. When you understand that every urge is a messenger and every temptation is a test of alignment, you stop seeing your desires as something to fear or suppress. Instead, you rise above them by seeing through them. You don't fight fire with shame, you turn it into fuel. And in doing so, you access a dimension of self-respect that radiates out into every part of your life. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, lead differently. You become the embodiment of discipline as identity. This isn't about denying your humanity. It's about honoring your divinity. Your prosperity doesn't begin in your bank account. It begins in your bloodstream. It begins in your breath, your restraint, your focus. It begins when you realize that the most powerful wealth you will ever generate starts with what you choose not to waste. That is the forgotten wisdom. That is the spiritual path hidden in plain sight. 2. Spiritual technology, not theory. Strategic celibacy is not about repression, but about intelligent redirection. It is the mastery of one's vital energy, a form of spiritual technology that unlocks a deeper level of power, presence, and prosperity. Carl Jung spoke of the transcendent function, a process that integrates opposites to birth something higher. And sexual energy is one of the most primal, potent forces within us that can be transmuted into genius, success, and soulful magnetism. When you stop wasting this energy through unconscious habits and instead conserve it, you activate a nervous system upgrade. Your brain rewires itself through neuroplasticity, and your entire energetic signature shifts. Your voice deepens, not just in sound, but in presence. Your intuition becomes razor sharp. You don't chase opportunities, they find you, because your aura starts to speak louder than your words. You radiate a silent confidence that cannot be faked. People feel your presence before they hear your voice. This is the essence of aura-based authority, where your energy precedes you, and your vibration does the talking. Most people live on autopilot, leaking their life force for momentary pleasure without realizing they are draining the very power that could build their empire. They seek prosperity by grinding harder, hustling longer, and sacrificing their inner alignment. But what if true prosperity is not earned by effort alone, but by alignment with intelligent spiritual wisdom? Prosperity is not just about money. It's about the quality of energy you carry when you enter a room. It's about the decisions you make when no one is watching, the discipline you uphold when the world encourages indulgence, the sacredness with which you treat your own body and mind. When you retain your sexual energy consciously, you aren't just abstaining, you are creating. You are building an internal reservoir of fire, a magnetic field of influence that rewires how people respond to you. Your energy becomes rare, and in a world obsessed with excess, rarity is value. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When you waste your sexual energy, you become a puppet of your unconscious. But when you harness it, you take the reins of destiny. This energy, when transmuted, is not just fuel for spiritual awakening, but the blueprint of divine prosperity. It flows into your work, your relationships, your voice, your timing. You start to experience synchronicity, alignment, and creative breakthroughs. You don't chase the world anymore. You become the still center that the world orbits around. Your magnetism multiplies, not because you're trying to impress, but because you've tapped into a spiritual intelligence most people ignore. You've become the volcano that doesn't erupt, but builds mountains. Have you ever consciously redirected your sexual energy toward your goals instead of instant gratification? If so, share your journey in the comments so others can be inspired. If not, comment, "I will try," and let's awaken the discipline within together. 3. The aura of silent prosperity. As you begin to preserve your sexual energy, your entire frequency shifts. You stop chasing and start attracting. There is a quiet power that builds in those who no longer leak their vitality through constant stimulation and momentary pleasure. You start to embody a magnetic presence that doesn't beg for attention, but commands it effortlessly. You walk into a room, and people feel your energy before a single word leaves your mouth. This is not arrogance. This is the silent confidence of someone who knows who they are and has reclaimed their life force. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a volcano. The question is whether you let it erupt in fleeting pleasure or whether you learn to harness it as the core fire of your creative force. Silent prosperity is not about loud declarations or superficial displays of success. It is a state of energetic alignment where wealth, health, respect, and influence flow to you as natural consequences of the person you've become. It emerges after years of private battles, of saying no to what tempts the weak and yes to what builds the strong. While the world applauds noise and distraction, you move differently. You glow in your stillness. You build in your silence. You no longer have to market your worth. It is felt through your aura. People are drawn to you because they sense something rare, something grounded, something sovereign. Your energy becomes a mirror. Those who are insecure feel intimidated. Those who are conscious feel inspired. When you retain and redirect your sexual energy, you become a creator in the highest sense. That same energy that could be lost in seconds can instead be transmuted into focused vision, elevated thought, spiritual awakening, and deeper connection with your purpose. It fuels your discipline. It sharpens your mind. It brings clarity to your relationships. You stop needing constant validation or temporary pleasure because you've built an internal kingdom that can't be shaken. And from this space, prosperity is no longer something you pursue. It's something you radiate. Your frequency becomes the currency. You attract clients, opportunities, respect, and deep love, not because you are trying to, but because your energy speaks louder than your appearance or achievements ever could. True spiritual development is learning how to govern your inner world with mastery. It's understanding that prosperity begins not with what you do, but with who you are when no one is watching. Every time you choose consciousness over compulsion, every time you channel rather than chase, you invest in a future that reflects your soul's strength. You are no longer ruled by your desires. You are ruled by your vision. In a world addicted to noise, your silence becomes gold. In a world obsessed with quick pleasure, your patience becomes power. And in a world confused about success, your energy becomes proof that the real wealth is invisible, yet undeniable to those who feel it. 4. Scientific backing. They never told you that the true source of prosperity has less to do with external resources and more to do with your internal energy economy, specifically your sexual energy. This force, when disciplined and consciously directed, becomes a spiritual engine for greatness. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And nowhere is this more evident than in how society unconsciously encourages the dissipation of the very energy meant to build empires. Scientific studies show that men who practice moderation, who choose retention over release, exhibit increased testosterone, enhanced cognitive function, and greater risk tolerance, the very qualities needed to thrive in a complex world. Brain scans confirm that these individuals develop denser gray matter in regions tied to impulse control and long-term decision-making, proving that spiritual awakening isn't just metaphysical, it's neurological, psychological, and deeply practical. Yet we live in a culture that celebrates release over restraint, distraction over direction, indulgence over intention. But those who understand the value of this inner fire do not squander it for temporary pleasure. They transmute it into permanent presence. The difference between the ordinary and the extraordinary is not in their resources, but in their relationship to their own energy. Sexual energy is not merely physical, it is creative, visionary, and magnetic. It builds legacies when guided upward, not wasted outward. It fuels intuition, fuels charisma, fuels the unshakable focus that makes people listen when you speak. While most are governed by their urges, a rare few rule their realm by mastering the flow within. They walk with a certain gravity. They radiate a frequency of wealth, not from their bank account, but from the discipline that makes abundance inevitable. This kind of spiritual intelligence is not taught in schools. It is discovered in silence, refined through awareness, and anchored through daily choices. Every time you resist unconscious gratification, you upgrade your nervous system to handle more power. You begin to attract people and opportunities that match your energetic clarity. You are no longer in survival mode, you are in creation mode. Prosperity doesn't chase the distracted, it flows to the aligned. Your aura expands, your voice deepens, your gaze sharpens, and your presence becomes the product. You stop begging for attention and start commanding respect without needing to raise your voice. This is the wealth of the awakened, the kind that cannot be stolen, taxed, or manipulated, because it is built from the inside out. The real question then is this: are you investing your energy like a sovereign being, or spending it like someone unaware of their power? Because every impulse mastered is a throne reclaimed. Every moment of conscious restraint is a vote for the future self you're becoming. And every time you choose focus over fragmentation, you step deeper into the current of spiritual wisdom that few dare to explore. True prosperity is not about having more. It's about becoming more. It's not about chasing success. It's about radiating such deep alignment that success can't help but find you. If the science behind this truth resonates with you, leave a like, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and tap the notification bell so you never miss insights like this. Type in the comments, "I choose to transform energy into prosperity." Let's declare it together. 5. Awakening the Inner King. Archetype. Carl Jung revealed that the journey to prosperity is not merely an outer chase for wealth, but an inner transformation through sacred archetypes, beginning with the warrior, moving through the magician, and culminating in the awakening of the king. In the warrior phase, you are no longer at war with the world. You are forging an alliance with your highest self. Here, discipline is not punishment, it is devotion. You rise early, not to prove anything to others, but because your soul recognizes the value of order. You eat with intention, breathe with awareness, speak with clarity, and train your body as a temple. You begin to understand that every wasted moment, every unconscious impulse, every drained interaction is not just a distraction. It is a robbery of your divine potential. The warrior learns to guard his sexual energy, not out of repression, but because he now knows its sacred value. This energy, when unguarded, becomes scattered and addictive. But when harnessed, it becomes focus, magnetism, and power. As discipline refines the body and will, the path opens into the magician phase, where the true magic begins. Your intuition sharpens, synchronicities increase, and the unseen world begins to speak. The magician studies energy, symbols, dreams, cycles, archetypes, and the deep coding of the psyche. He begins to notice how thoughts shape emotions, how emotions shape energy, and how energy shapes reality. The magician no longer participates in drama. He observes it, transmutes it, and redirects his focus toward creation. He understands that sexual energy is not simply for pleasure. It is the raw life force that animates vision, manifestation, and spiritual intelligence. In this phase, you become a master of inner alchemy. You realize that real prosperity is a byproduct of spiritual alignment. The more deeply you know yourself, the more the world begins to mirror your worth. Carl Jung's famous quote echoes here: "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." This is the phase where you wake up, not just spiritually, but energetically. Then, without announcement or fanfare, the king arrives. He does not emerge because he was crowned by others. He emerges because he crowned himself within. The king is not chasing validation, deals, or applause. He knows his value. He creates from overflow, not need. He is magnetic because he is anchored. In rooms full of chaos, he is calm. In moments of pressure, he is clear. The king does not control others. He controls his state. That is why people trust him, follow him, and are transformed in his presence. He doesn't build empires by force. He builds them through resonance. His wealth is not stored in bank accounts. It is stored in presence, clarity, direction, and unshakable inner peace. He has mastered his sexual energy, not by denying it, but by embodying it as sacred fire that builds, protects, awakens, and blesses. The king archetype is the highest expression of masculine leadership, regal, rooted, radiant. This entire path, warrior, magician, king, is the map to true prosperity, not as society defines it, but as spiritual wisdom reveals it. When you begin to walk this path, you no longer ask, "How can I get more?" You ask, "How can I become more?" You realize that prosperity is not outside of you. It is a reflection of how deeply you've honored the power within you. You stop reacting and start ruling. And you understand that the richest man is not the one who accumulates the most, but the one who can hold the most energy, the most vision, the most stillness, and transmute all of it into divine order. That is what it means to awaken the inner king. That is the forgotten intelligence Carl Jung tried to show us. That your wealth begins in your nervous system, your attention, your discipline, and your sacred sexual energy. This is not just about money. This is about becoming the kind of man or soul who doesn't need to chase anything, because they have become everything. 6. Synchronicity, magnetism, and manifestation. Sexual energy, when elevated through conscious spiritual development, becomes the very force that bends reality in your favor. It is not merely a biological impulse. It is raw, creative power, waiting to be transmuted. Carl Jung warned that what we do not bring into consciousness will rule our lives as fate. And this includes the vast energy many unconsciously waste. When you refine this energy through inner work, it no longer controls you. It begins to guide you. You stop chasing, you start attracting. And that attraction is not just romantic or physical. It becomes magnetic prosperity. The people, opportunities, resources, and synchronicities that once felt distant begin to orbit around your presence, not because you asked, but because you aligned. This is where the myth of hard work begins to fall apart. You can grind all day and still be out of flow, because the universe responds not to your effort, but to your frequency. You've been told success is about discipline and sacrifice, but the deepest spiritual wisdom teaches that manifestation is about coherence. When your energy is scattered, life feels resistant. But when your energy is sacred, life feels synchronistic. High sexual energy becomes the generator of this coherence. It sharpens your intuition into precision. It transforms vague desire into embodied magnetism. You walk into rooms differently. You stop proving your worth and begin radiating it. You become the mirror through which others see what they lack or crave. Prosperity doesn't arrive because you chase it. It arrives because you are it. You've turned your life force into a signal silent, unwavering, and sovereign. This is the secret the modern world doesn't teach. That wealth is not what you hold in your hands, it's what you carry in your field. Most people are stuck in loops of energetic leakage, never realizing that their biggest drain is their inability to contain and direct their own power. But when you reclaim your sexual energy, when you stop outsourcing your validation and learn to sit with the fire inside you without needing to extinguish it for temporary pleasure, something divine happens. You become the still point in a spinning world. And from that stillness, creation begins. The message is not to suppress, but to sublimate, to alchemize your raw energy into intention, your longing into purpose, your desires into design. Spirituality is not about escaping the body. It is about mastering the power within it. Spiritual development is not a retreat from the world. It is a recalibration so that the world begins to respond to you differently. The real secret is this: when you carry your energy with sacred awareness, prosperity no longer becomes something you pursue. It becomes a natural extension of your vibration. You attract not because you're desperate, but because you've become undeniable. Thank you for watching. If this message awakens something within you, if you're ready to reclaim your power and transform your energy into true prosperity, then this is just the beginning. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So don't let your most powerful force stay hidden any longer. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more transformative insights. Tap the notification bell so you'll never miss the next step on your spiritual journey. Your energy unmasks their lies. Carl Jung on envy and empaths. As Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what happens when your very presence, your peace, your empathy, your authenticity irritates others because it reflects back the truth they try to hide? If you've ever walked into a room and felt an invisible shift, or sensed a hidden resentment behind a smile, this message is for you. Your energy doesn't just enter a space, it exposes what's lurking beneath the surface. In today's video, we'll explore how being an empath makes you a mirror for other people's unconscious envy and projections. So before we dive in, comment below. Have you ever felt someone smiling at you, but secretly resenting you? Let's open up the conversation, because your story might be the light someone else needs. 1. The empath's gift is a wound. Transformed. Empaths are not simply sensitive people. They are alchemists of pain. They emerge from childhood not untouched, but transformed by emotional wounds that taught them how to read between the silences. When love was conditional, they learned to attune themselves to shifts in tone, to absorb moods before words were even spoken. This survival instinct matured into a rare spiritual gift, the ability to feel others deeply, to intuit what lies beneath the surface. Yet what begins as a coping mechanism becomes a radiant presence, and this presence, rooted in spiritual awakening, is both a blessing and a burden in a world addicted to illusion. The empath's energy doesn't just comfort, it confronts. It stirs what others have buried. It unearths what's been denied. And in doing so, it reveals a truth few are ready to face. Your light exposes their shadow. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the paradox of the empath. Their existence brings the unconscious to light not through confrontation, but through resonance. They reflect back to others what they are unwilling to confront in themselves. That reflection can feel like love or threat, depending on how awake the other soul is. For those still wearing emotional masks, the empath becomes unbearable, not because they do harm, but because they do nothing to maintain the illusion. Their stillness becomes a mirror. Their authenticity becomes a siren. They don't need to argue, compete, or dominate. Their mere presence destabilizes false power dynamics. The spiritual wisdom they embody disrupts the energetic equilibrium of relationships built on control or performance. And this is where envy creeps in, not the kind that desires your gifts, but the kind that resents your existence, especially from those who claim to love you. They may admire your empathy in words, but reject your truth in practice. Because your ability to sense what is unspoken, to name the undercurrents others try to dismiss, makes you both magnetic and dangerous. It is a psychological and spiritual confrontation, and most are not ready. Instead of evolving, they recoil. Instead of owning their projections, they blame you. The empath becomes the scapegoat, the problem, the one who's too sensitive, when in reality, they are simply unwilling to pretend. Your presence exposes their performance, and in doing so, you become the enemy of their illusion. In modern life, where emotional disconnection is normalized and attention is currency, your spiritual clarity feels like rebellion. You begin to realize that you were never too much. You were simply in too many spaces that could not handle truth. Relationships built on pretense will crumble in your presence, not because you want them to, but because your soul is allergic to falsehood. This is your awakening. It is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to be clarifying. The gift that once isolated you is the same one that now sets you free. You see through people, and that power makes you unforgettable. So honor your energy. Let those who envy it fall away. And remember, You were never meant to be understood by those still hiding from themselves. 2. Envy masquerades as love. Those who claim to love you but secretly feel discomfort around your presence are often not reacting to you. They're reacting to the light you carry. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But when people are not ready for that understanding, your light becomes a threat. Unlike jealousy, which at least acknowledges value and seeks to possess it, envy carries a more corrosive energy. It doesn't want what you have. It wants to destroy what makes you radiant. For the empath, this becomes an invisible battleground. Your emotional intelligence, your spiritual wisdom, your ability to feel deeply and speak truthfully exposes the illusions others live by. You become a mirror they didn't ask for, a reflection of what they've denied, repressed, or abandoned within themselves. Your very existence challenges their comfort zone. And so, they resent you, but in ways they cannot even admit to themselves. Envy often wears the mask of love. It hides behind praise laced with subtle criticism. It cloaks itself in support that feels strangely conditional. It shows up in moments where your joy is met with silence, your ideas are dismissed, or your boundaries are seen as rejection. These are not accidents. This is unconscious envy, leaking through cracks in the false self. Carl Jung reminds us that what we repress does not disappear. It returns in distorted form. In the empath's world, this means those who are closest to you may unconsciously resent the very qualities they claim to admire. You are not just a person to them. You are a symbol of emotional freedom, truth, clarity. And if they haven't yet claimed those parts of themselves, they will either worship you, sabotage you, or try to dull you down. The tragedy is that many empaths confuse this dynamic with real love. Because they feel deeply, they assume others do too. But love without self-awareness turns into possession. Connection without reflection becomes control. You must learn to recognize when the bond is no longer nourishing, but draining. When the words don't match the energy. When you leave a conversation feeling smaller, more confused, less alive. These are signs that someone's unconscious envy is at work, and your spiritual awakening is trying to tell you the truth. That your energy is not too much. It's too honest, too clear, too unfiltered. It cuts through emotional masks like a blade of light, and not everyone is ready for that. When you begin to trust your sensitivity as intelligence, you stop second-guessing yourself. You stop trying to prove your worth to people who are secretly triggered by it. You stop dimming your light to keep their shadows intact. You realize that your presence alone reveals what others are trying to hide from themselves and from you. And that is not your burden to carry. Your task is not to heal their discomfort. Your task is to walk in truth, with discernment, with grace, with the quiet strength that comes from knowing your soul is not here to be liked. It's here to be real. And realness will always unmask the lie. 3. Envy hides in subtle sabotage. Envy doesn't always strike with obvious hatred. It moves in silence, hiding behind soft smiles and subtle sabotage. You feel it in the dismissive jokes that undercut your deepest truths, in the way someone withdraws their support just when you need it most, in the way they mock your emotional depth and call you too sensitive, like it's an insult instead of a gift. These wounds don't come from strangers. They come from those who say they love you, and that's what makes them so confusing, so disorienting. You begin to question your perception, your feelings, your very reality, because how could someone who claims to care also be the one causing your emotional erosion? Carl Jung taught that what is unconscious in others gets projected onto those who carry light. When you are on a path of spirituality and spiritual development, you become a mirror. Your energy reflects back everything they are unwilling to face. You don't have to say a word. Your presence alone unravels their mask. And so, rather than celebrate you, they criticize your passion, minimize your pain, or ignore your evolution. Not because you're wrong, but because your growth reminds them of their stagnation. The empath, attuned to the invisible threads of emotional energy, often walks into rooms already knowing too much. You sense the tension before anyone speaks. Feel the resentment behind their smile. Hear the unspoken jealousy beneath their praise. It is not your imagination. Their envy cloaks itself in polite silence or performative support, but your spirit knows. Your light agitates the shadows they haven't dealt with. And instead of thanking you for holding up a mirror, they resent you for it. They pull back, not because you are too much, but because you reflect back the parts of themselves they are unwilling to confront. And still, you doubt yourself. You wonder if you're being dramatic, if you're overreacting, if maybe you are too emotional. But this self-doubt is exactly what their passive envy feeds on. The empath becomes isolated not through loud rejection, but through quiet neglect, being excluded from conversations, being met with lukewarm reactions to moments of success, being given silence where there should have been applause. And the more awakened you become, the more clearly you see it. The more you elevate spiritually, the more their subtle betrayals reveal themselves not as misunderstandings, but as signs of emotional immaturity and spiritual avoidance. You were not born to make others comfortable. You were born to be the fire that exposes what needs to be transformed. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. It is divine intelligence. Your emotions are not unstable. They are spiritual wisdom. And your energy doesn't just exist. It speaks. It illuminates. It unmasks. So when someone resents you without reason, when their affection feels laced with something colder, know this: you are not the problem. You are the mirror. And what they see in you is a reflection of what they've denied in themselves. Don't dim your light to soothe their shadows. Don't shrink your truth so others don't feel exposed. And don't apologize for being a soul that sees too clearly in a world addicted to pretending. Your energy unmasks their lies, not to hurt them, but to heal them. Whether they choose to face that or not is not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to keep growing, to keep shining, and to never abandon your inner knowing for external approval. 4. The archetype of the wounded healer. Empaths often embody the spiritual archetype of the wounded healer, those who have been broken, bruised, and burned by life. Yet instead of shutting down, they rise with a deep soul-level commitment to help others rise too. Their gift is not just emotional sensitivity. It is the ability to feel pain, transmute it, and turn it into light. But that light, as beautiful as it is, becomes a beacon for the emotionally immature, the energetically hungry, and those who see the empath's warmth not as sacred, but as something to consume. These people don't see the healer's wounds. nor do they care to acknowledge the silent strength it takes to hold others while still learning how to hold themselves. Instead, they take and take, often wrapped in masks of affection, admiration, or need, slowly draining the empath's life force under the guise of closeness. What they truly envy is not your kindness, but your inner glow, your ability to stay soft in a world that tried to make you hard. Carl Jung warned us that envy is the unconscious homage that mediocrity pays to genius. And in the life of the empath, envy often hides behind smiles and false praise. It is rarely spoken aloud, but you can feel it in the sharpness of their silence, the sudden coldness in the room when you succeed, the passive-aggressive comments cloaked in concern. They resent that your energy heals without effort, that your presence calms storms they haven't learned how to face within themselves. They may not say it, but deep down, they can't understand how someone who's been through so much can still radiate light. And because they don't understand it, they label it, project onto it, or attempt to control it. This is the spiritual battlefield that empaths quietly walk every day. Your spiritual awakening becomes a threat to those still asleep in their patterns. Your boundaries become offensive to those who benefited from your lack of them. And your decision to protect your peace will be misunderstood by those who only knew how to relate to your pain. In everyday life, this plays out subtly and consistently. People come to you when their world is falling apart, but they disappear when yours begins to shake. They call you strong when you're silent, but selfish when you finally speak up. They praise your wisdom, but reject your truth when it doesn't cater to their comfort. This is why empaths must evolve beyond being available. Spirituality is not servitude. Spiritual growth is not about allowing yourself to be emptied over and over again to prove your worth. It's about recognizing that you were never meant to be a constant healer for those who refuse to heal themselves. You are not a crutch for their emotional avoidance. You are a mirror one that reflects both their potential and their resistance. And that reflection can feel like a threat to someone who is still addicted to their own illusions. The path forward for the wounded healer is not martyrdom, but sovereignty. It's understanding that you are not here to be consumed. You are here to be conscious. You are not a lifeboat for those who refuse to swim. You are the lighthouse, shining not because others need saving, but because you were born to glow. Spiritual wisdom demands that you no longer betray yourself just to keep the peace. Your energy, your clarity, your boundaries are sacred. And the more you honor them, the more you step into your highest self. Let those who are meant for your frequency rise to meet you. Let the rest be unmasked by the purity of your presence. 5. False love is an energetic vampirism. False love is not affection. It is energetic theft, wearing the mask of intimacy. Many empaths walk into relationships that look full of promise, only to find themselves emotionally starved. It's like a dream banquet, where everything appears abundant, but every bite turns to ash. These relationships don't feed your soul. They feed off it. The so-called lover doesn't love you. They extract from you. They crave your emotional depth, your kindness, your healing presence. But deep down, they also resent you for it. As Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that's the exact thing they haven't done. So when you arrive with self-awareness and emotional depth, Your very being becomes a mirror to everything they've refused to face within themselves. They say they love you, but what they really love is your light until it reveals their shadow. Your energy begins to unmask their lies, not by accusation, but simply by existing in truth. You don't have to say a word. Your presence speaks louder than their performance. This triggers something ancient in them, a wound they never healed. They start to envy you. And envy, unlike desire, does not want what you have. It wants you to lose it. They smile, but secretly compete, support, but quietly sabotage. Your empathy becomes a burden in these dynamics because you keep feeling sorry for the one who's draining you. You try to fix them, uplift them, stay longer hoping they'll see your heart. But they already do, and it terrifies them. Carl Jung taught that envy is a shadow projected outward. What they hate in you is what they've rejected in themselves: openness, vulnerability, integrity, and soul. They can't receive your love fully because they don't love themselves yet. Instead, they manipulate, guilt trip, withdraw affection, and make you question your worth. This isn't romance, it's spiritual erosion. Empaths often confuse spiritual warfare for spiritual connection because they feel everything so deeply. You think this intensity must mean something sacred, when in truth, it's just chaos cloaked in chemistry. You're not in love, you're in survival. If you're constantly exhausted, doubting your intuition, and explaining your existence to someone who never truly sees you, then you're not growing, you're shrinking. And the person who claims to love you may actually resent your light because it exposes their darkness. This isn't just emotional manipulation, it's energetic vampirism. And your intelligence and spiritual wisdom knows it before your mind does. That gut feeling, that sudden drop in energy when you're around them, that's not paranoia. That's your soul saying, get out. You were not born to be someone's emotional bandage. Your energy is sacred. It is the frequency of truth in a world addicted to illusion. Real love will never make you shrink. Real love doesn't ask you to dim. It celebrates you, expands you, protects you. So when someone starts competing with your peace, resenting your calm, or punishing your clarity, believe what your energy is telling you. Because your spiritual awakening didn't come to make you lovable to others, it came to make you unshakable in your own light. 6. Dreams as warnings from the psyche. Empaths don't just dream, they receive encrypted messages from the soul. When you see yourself drowning, being hunted, or handed an empty gift, that's not just a random nightmare. That's your psyche raising a red flag. In the language of Carl Jung, these are symbols from the unconscious, alerting you to a deeper betrayal. What appears as love is actually spiritual theft. You sense it, but can't always explain it. That's the tragedy and the genius of the empathic spirit. You feel the truth before you can name it. These dreams are not accidents. Drowning reflects emotional overwhelm caused by someone projecting their unresolved pain onto you. Being chased mirrors the psychological tension of constantly dodging emotional manipulation or pressure to conform. And the empty gift. It's the clearest symbol of all. The illusion of support that disguises envy, wrapped in a smile but hollow at the core. The truth is, empaths live with an open channel to spiritual intelligence, and that makes them both radiant and triggering to others. People who secretly envy you may present themselves as caretakers, friends, even lovers. But their affection is conditional, rooted not in love, but in control. They don't want you to rise. They want access to your light. The more you evolve spiritually, the more their discomfort grows, because your growth unmasks their stagnation. You don't need to confront them to feel this. Your dreams do it for you. The subconscious doesn't lie. In the dream realm, the soul whispers what the ego ignores. And when you're spiritually awake, even sleep becomes a battlefield of truth. Spiritual development sharpens this inner knowing. It's not just about becoming more compassionate, it's about becoming more discerning. As you deepen your own awareness, you start to notice the difference between someone who truly supports your expansion and someone who subtly undermines it. Jung reminds us that envy isn't admiration gone wrong. It's resentment masked as affection. That's why your nervous system tightens around certain people. Why you feel drained after conversations that seemed harmless. Why you smile through interactions that leave you hollow. These aren't just personality conflicts. They're energy warnings. You must begin to honor these subtle shifts as sacred data. Your body knows. Your dreams know. The only question is, will you listen? Emotional vampirism thrives in silence when you ignore your inner signals to keep the peace, to avoid judgment, or because the betrayal doesn't come with sharp teeth. But once you start trusting your energy above their words, the fog lifts. You no longer second-guess your intuition. You walk away, not with rage, but with clarity. That is the mark of true spiritual maturity, knowing that not everyone who loves you is safe for your spirit. So when the dream returns, when you're drowning again, being chased again, holding the empty gift again, don't dismiss it. Decode it. Ask yourself, who in your life is offering less than they claim? Who benefits from your openness but cannot celebrate your light? Who masks envy as loyalty? The answer won't come through logic. It will rise through the body, through the symbols, through the stillness. That is the realm where empaths thrive, not just in feeling everything, but in interpreting it with wisdom. Because the path of spirituality is not to escape the world. It's to see it clearly, feel it honestly, and protect your soul fiercely. 7. Projection. Envy's psychological root. There is a silent war envy wages, and it always begins with projection. Instead of confronting their inner wounds, those who are envious cast their pain onto others, turning their shame into accusations. When you walk as an empath, someone deeply attuned to emotion, intuition, and subtle energies, you naturally become a mirror. And not everyone is ready to see their own reflection. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But those unwilling to take responsibility for their shadow will instead aim to make you the problem. They'll call you fragile when it is they who can't regulate their emotions. They'll say you're unstable when it is their identity that is crumbling behind the mask. They'll accuse you of being too emotional because they've never developed the courage to feel their own grief, rage, or longing. Envy doesn't admire or simply desire, it resents. And resentment, when left unchecked, distorts the truth. It fabricates a narrative where your light becomes the threat and their darkness becomes justified. In this inversion of truth, the empath becomes the villain in their story, not because of what they've done, but because of what they embody: spiritual clarity, emotional depth, and authenticity. The empath, in their stillness, disrupts the false peace of those who live in denial. Your very presence threatens the illusion. And because they cannot control or become what you are, they attempt to redefine you through blame, gossip, mockery, or psychological manipulation. But what they attack is not your weakness. It is your strength, your ability to stay soft in a hard world, your gift of spiritual awareness in a culture that rewards emotional numbness. In their eyes, you are too much, but only because you are not pretending to be less. That triggers a deep and unconscious truth within them, that you are living in alignment with something they have betrayed within themselves. So the projection becomes a form of punishment, an emotional redirection to silence the mirror and avoid awakening. This is why spiritual awakening requires boundaries. Your energy is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. To protect your peace is not arrogance, it is wisdom. You are not here to absorb the shame of those who refuse to face their wounds. You are not responsible for the stories they invent to avoid transformation. The more you rise in self-awareness, the more visible you become to those still trapped in self-deception. Let their envy reveal their suffering, not your identity. Let their rejection become redirection back to your own center. Do not shrink. Do not explain. Do not betray your intuition just to make someone else feel comfortable in their illusions. They say you are sensitive, but what they mean is, you make me feel things I've buried. They say you're dramatic, but what they mean is, your truth is louder than my lie. And they say you are unstable, but what they mean is, your presence exposes how disconnected I've become. So let your energy continue to unmask what is false, not through confrontation, but by remaining true to yourself. In a world addicted to projection, your self-awareness is rebellion. In a world drowning in image, your authenticity is a revolution. And in a world where envy seeks to distort the light, your spiritual wisdom becomes the one thing they cannot touch. 8. Spiritual alchemy and the shadow. You are not just a presence in the room. You are a mirror that reveals what others try to bury within themselves. Carl Jung called this the nigredo, the dark night of the soul, the necessary chaos before rebirth, and you, unknowingly, bring others to that edge. As an empath, your emotional and spiritual intelligence naturally pierces through illusions, and in doing so, you disturb the shadow others have spent their entire lives avoiding. Not through confrontation, but simply by being real in a world built on performance. Your energy unmasks the lies they tell themselves, and in their discomfort, they blame you. They don't want your truth. They want your silence. But your very existence activates their reckoning. They project, not because you've done harm, but because your light reminds them of their own darkness. You trigger what they fear. Transformation. Envy doesn't always scream. Often, it hides behind compliments, subtle jabs, or the forced smiles of those who claim to love you. It doesn't want what you have. It wants you not to have it. It doesn't admire. It resents. Your radiance feels like exposure, your clarity like confrontation. They sense your alignment, and instead of rising to meet their own, they fall into comparison. This is where your role becomes both powerful and painful. You become the emotional dumping ground for those too afraid to face themselves. They don't realize that your spiritual wisdom comes from surviving the very shadows they now deny. You have walked through emotional fires and alchemized them into light, and that light reveals their wounds. Carl Jung warned, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." And so, they resist you, hoping the truth will vanish if the mirror disappears. You internalize this. You question your worth. You wonder why love feels like rejection and why kindness is often returned with cruelty. But this is not a flaw in you. It is your function. You are the awakener, the soul disruptor, the spark that catalyzes the unseen. In a society that rewards numbness and detachment, your empathy is an act of defiance. While others shut down to survive, you open up to transmute. Your spiritual awakening is not a personal event. It is a ripple effect. Every time you hold space for truth, even silently, you unravel the collective illusion. You are not here to fix them. You are not here to shrink. You are here to stand in your own frequency, even when it unsettles the room. Especially then. This is alchemy. This is why your energy both attracts and repels. You are not too much. You are exactly the medicine some people are not ready to take. You do not have to defend your intuition, explain your knowledge, or dull your vibration. Your presence is the initiation they didn't ask for, and their discomfort is not your responsibility. In Jung's spiritual framework, this is sacred tension, the friction between shadow and soul. You are not the villain in their story. You are the threshold. So trust your sensitivity, protect your light, and understand this. To walk with this kind of awareness is not weakness. It is power in its highest, most intelligent form. 9. Individuation as the path to freedom. Individuation is not just a concept. It is the key to your emotional and spiritual freedom. It's the moment when you, as an empath, stop believing that your sensitivity is a curse and start honoring it as a sacred calling. It is the inner transformation where your deepest wound becomes your deepest wisdom. You've been conditioned to overextend, to offer your light without limit, to carry what isn't yours just to keep the peace. But peace built on self-betrayal is not peace. It's spiritual erosion. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges to the truth of who you are. They say, I will love you, but not at the cost of abandoning myself. Choosing when to give rather than giving compulsively is not coldness, it is clarity. Because when giving is driven by compulsion, it is no longer an act of love. It becomes an act of survival, rooted in fear, guilt, or the need to be needed. And that cycle is the very thing individuation breaks. Carl Jung taught that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that journey requires more than healing, it requires remembering. It asks you to stop being a mirror for other people's projections and to start becoming the mirror of your own soul. Spirituality, in its highest form, is not about being endlessly accommodating. It's about knowing where your energy ends and where another's begins. It's about spiritual development through discernment, seeing through the false masks of those who smile with envy hidden behind their eyes. When you protect your light unapologetically, you don't become hard, you become clear. You don't lose compassion, you gain wisdom. You begin to realize that love without boundaries is not love, it's a performance. You were not born to be the emotional sponge of the world. You were born to illuminate, to awaken, to challenge what is false by the simple truth of your being. And that truth becomes powerful the moment you stop shrinking. Stop dimming. Stop apologizing. Your sensitivity is not a liability. It is an antenna for truth. But only when paired with boundaries does it become a force of spiritual evolution. There is no virtue in sacrificing your well-being to prove your loyalty. There is no glory in rescuing others while you drown. True empathy involves saying no. It involves stepping back. It involves choosing solitude over toxicity. And that choice is not cruel, it's conscious. So you set boundaries, not to push people away, but to honor the sacred space where your soul can finally breathe. You refuse to carry another's shadow, not because you lack compassion, but because you respect the law of spiritual responsibility. You protect your light not from arrogance, but from understanding. And you choose when to give, because you now give from wholeness, not from a wound. That is individuation. That is spiritual development. That is how your energy stops being used and starts becoming sacred. 10. Transformation. From wounded to sovereign empath. There comes a moment in every empath's spiritual awakening where the veil lifts not from the world, but from their own eyes. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy, drama for depth, and most painfully, envy for love. Envy is a spiritual parasite dressed as devotion. And for the empath, it often hides behind the smiles of those who say they adore you, but are secretly drained by your light. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But for the empath, it's even more terrifying to realize that others do not accept you. They envy the parts of you they cannot control. When you are spiritually intelligent and deeply attuned, you can feel the distortion beneath the surface. But your soul, desperate for connection, often chooses to look the other way. Until one day, the truth becomes louder than the illusion. This is when you rise. This is the sacred threshold where the empath becomes sovereign, the one who loves without losing themselves, who sees clearly without self-betrayal, who stops shrinking to be palatable and starts standing tall in truth. The sovereign empath is not cold. They are crystalline. They no longer mistake chaos for chemistry. They recognize when energy is manipulative and when it is mutual. They no longer offer their healing to those who refuse to heal. They stop apologizing for their sensitivity and start honoring it as a spiritual superpower. Instead of lowering their frequency to keep others comfortable, they now radiate with unapologetic clarity. They know that some people do not want healing. They want attention, control, or access to your light without ever earning your trust. Your energy becomes the ultimate lie detector. It unravels projection. It exposes pretense. And when your energy becomes that clear, it will unmask the envy hidden in compliments, the resentment behind help, and the competition cloaked as closeness. You begin to walk with sacred solitude instead of emotional dependency. You no longer chase being understood. You become a mirror of truth, and only those who are ready for their own reflection will stay. You stop attracting love that drains and begin magnetizing love that amplifies. You no longer accept half-hearted affection or performative loyalty. You wait for the sacred, the aligned, the true. This is not just healing, it's remembrance. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to be witnessed, honored, and loved in your fullness. The sovereign empath turns wounds into wisdom, betrayal into boundaries, and isolation into inner authority. This isn't personal growth, it's a spiritual revolution. And if you are walking this path, know this: you are not alone. You are a pattern breaker, a truth bearer, a silent warrior. You chose to feel it all so that the future wouldn't have to live in numbness. That is not a weakness. That is divine intelligence. That is spiritual wisdom. And that, beloved, is your becoming. 11. True love is not envious. True love nourishes your spirit rather than depleting it. It rejoices in your light instead of resenting it, and it encourages your wholeness, never demanding your sacrifice. It is not threatened by your growth, but inspired by it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And in the context of love, this means being with someone who supports your becoming rather than suppressing it. Yet for many empaths, love has long been confused with endurance. The more pain they tolerate, the more loyal they believe they are. But that is not loyalty. That is spiritual amnesia. Envy is the silent toxin that hides behind smiles and sweet words, yet its energy betrays its intentions. It does not seek to elevate you, but to contain you. It cannot celebrate your joy because it secretly fears that your joy invalidates its own story. When you are an empath, deeply sensitive to the emotional undercurrents around you, you may feel this contradiction without understanding it, why someone who claims to love you always seems uncomfortable when you shine. The answer lies in their unconscious resentment, in their refusal to confront their own inner emptiness, which your light exposes. This is where spiritual wisdom becomes your protection. To awaken is to see clearly, not just with your eyes, but with your soul. When you stop confusing self-sacrifice for love, you no longer allow others to consume your energy to validate their illusions. You stop playing the role of the emotional savior and instead step into the truth of your being whole, worthy, and enough. Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The moment you recognize that you were never meant to dim your brilliance for anyone's comfort is the moment you reclaim your power. When you rise into this level of consciousness, you attract those who are not intimidated by your intelligence or radiance. Instead of resenting your growth, they are inspired by it. You no longer beg for love in places that require your silence to stay. You no longer confuse toxicity with passion. You begin to understand that real love feels like peace, not chaos, not confusion, not compromise at the cost of your soul. It feels like alignment, like coming home to yourself without apology. And when you honor this truth, you become a beacon not for those who need to be healed by your light, but for those who can walk beside it in truth, in reverence, and in love. 12. The final truth. They didn't envy your money, your appearance, or even your accomplishments. They envied your depth, your presence, your emotional wisdom. Carl Jung reminded us, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And when someone envies you, it's rarely about what you have. It's about what you are. Your emotional clarity, your spiritual development, your calm, steady energy disrupts the illusions others have built for themselves. You feel everything. You walk into a room, and your nervous system starts reading the atmosphere like sonar. Who's anxious? Who's insecure? Who's pretending to be fine? And that's not a curse. That's your gift. But gifts like yours are misunderstood by those who've spent a lifetime running from their own truth. When people haven't faced their own emotions, your ability to feel becomes threatening. When they haven't cultivated inner peace, your presence feels like confrontation. Not because you are unkind, but because you reflect a standard they've abandoned. You don't have to speak a word. Your energy reveals what they're hiding. And that's where envy begins, not as a compliment, but as a psychological rejection. of what they fear they'll never become. You are the mirror, and not everyone is ready to see their own reflection. Some people react with admiration, but others react with resentment because your authenticity reminds them of their inauthenticity. Your groundedness reveals their chaos. Your calmness becomes unbearable to those addicted to noise. That's why spiritual clarity is disruptive. Empaths don't just feel emotions. They awaken emotions in others that have long been buried. And instead of taking responsibility for their feelings, some people will blame you for awakening them. That is not your fault. Your power is not the problem. The real problem is that the world has not been taught how to love people who see clearly. But you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to live with integrity, to honor your sensitivity as strength, and to protect your peace like sacred fire. Spirituality without boundaries invites burnout. Compassion without discernment turns into energetic leakage. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are a fully awake soul in a world still hitting snooze. And the sooner you accept that your presence will disturb those who have not yet met themselves, the freer you become. You don't owe anyone your silence just to keep their illusions intact. You don't have to shrink so others feel tall. The purpose of your spiritual development is not to dim your light, but to learn how to hold it in a way that doesn't burn you out. Your light isn't a performance, it's a frequency. And it's okay if not everyone is tuned in. Let that be your clarity, not your shame. What others can't handle in you is often the very thing you were born to carry. That's not ego. That's a sacred responsibility. You don't have to be less. You just have to be whole. So stay steady. Keep shining. And when your energy unmasks their lies, don't explain. Just keep walking in truth. If this message stirred something deep within you, know that your energy is your truth, and truth has a way of revealing everything that is false. In a world full of masks, your authenticity is revolutionary. Thank you for walking this path of spiritual wisdom with us. If you found this video meaningful, please like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next awakening. Until next time, stay radiant and trust the wisdom within your soul.